My name is Tshiamo. I'm the director for the African Open Science Platform. We're very excited to be part of this year's conference, particularly to share what we are doing in the continent through the African Open Science Platform in advancing, obviously, open science, but avenues for AI in the continent. There's very clear use cases, good examples of the use of AI in terms of various domains. But I think it's very critical to look at the building blocks that will enable the continent, for example, to be able to accrue the best value out of AI. There's clearly lack of enabling policies that will provide the scaffolding for developing AI in the continent. Certainly at a national level, very few countries have finalized or developed AI policies. Certainly also at the regional level, there is also a glaring gap regarding AI policies and strategies. Certainly also for the continent. I think it's very, very critical that also areas like skills development are enshrined and promoted and perpetuated in the implementation of any such developed strategies. And one opportunity is really to mainstream AI into schools, curricula, and universities and create a pipeline of skills at our institutions. But critically, the issue of data is a key one and is the elephant in the room. There is need to develop the necessary requisite infrastructure to host data in the continent, in particular to a certain data sovereignty. It's also very critical for the continent to really think about what AI means in terms of the continental context, and thereby also define the necessary programs and projects to identify data sets in various domains that could be of importance to those particular use cases. There is an opportunity here to leverage the open agenda and develop data sets that are findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and openly available to be accessible to all. A lot of groundwork has been done already in terms of the various baselines, in terms of the various studies, and obviously some of the recommendations there are very clear. I think UNESCO has done very good work in terms of the recommendations on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And I think the work that has been done to operationalize the STI SDG roadmaps will also be critical in infusing the relevant areas of SDGs so far as potential of using AI is concerned. There are also other various surveys that have also provided very, very good insights into the potential of AI in the continent. There's been very good dialogue in the continent around AI at various levels, including at a very high level regarding governments and officials. And these various dialogue platforms and forums came with very, very important recommendations, including for countries to really consider developing AI policies or integrating AI into national development policies and strategies. And I think this is very critical because AI could be an instrument for development. And I think the dialogues also highlighted the need to really domesticate AI in the African continent and make sure that developments around AI are also inclusive and reinforce inclusive behaviors. I think in developing these policies and strategies, there's also a realization and a need to really look at approaches that are holistic, but that are also encompassing the necessary human rights approaches, making sure that AI does not do any harm, safety and security, inclusivity, the engagements of multi-stakeholders, accountability and transparency. And I think this is very, very critical. There's need to develop capacity in terms of assisting countries in developing such relevant AI policies. To this extent, the African Union is driving the development of an AU AI strategy that is gone through validation and will soon be ratified and approved. There are a number of pillars that are obviously strategic to the continent, and there are also very important key areas that the strategy is to highlight. Notwithstanding, is very, very critical to maximize the benefits of AI and to build capacities and capabilities for AI. and also to identify areas, for example, where AI could be used to improve livelihoods across board. And I think there is very, very critical opportunity here to use AI to progress regional and continental collaborations and partnerships. I think the area of SDGs is quite critical as we look for areas where AI could make a difference. We recently arrived from or engaged at the Fourth International Forum on Big Data for Sustainable Development. And it was very clear in the conversations there that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of the attainment of SDG targets. And one of the key areas that has been identified for the lack of progress is really the gap in data, including, for example, collecting data sets for the environment. There were some very, very good announcements made by the relevant stakeholders, including the Center for Big Data and Sustainable Development in China, regarding, for example, their satellite program for environmental SDGs. And I think also as a continent, it will be very, very critical to think about this issue of data that is necessary for the basis of doing good AI and hence providing solutions that are relevant to the continent. There has been some progress in developing some data policy frameworks. The AU data policy framework was developed and approved the last year, primarily looking at the area of digital transformation. And I think it will be very, very critical for such policy frameworks to be effected and also to overcome other areas, for example, including research data outside the traditional discussions there and digital transformation. It's also critical, I think, to have these parallel conversations together and connect them. The conversations regarding AI and the role of AI in science, and the conversations around open science. The UNESCO has provided some very good recommendations in consultation with member states, and the recommendations are very clear as to what role players should do, including the issue of infrastructure, the issue of policies, the issues of culture, the issues of making sure that society is kept at the core. I think the issue of infrastructure has also been in discussions for some time. Most continents and most countries may be a bit behind in terms of investment in infrastructure. There's an opportunity here through fostering global collaborations in research infrastructures, because therein we'll be addressing the gaps regarding data collection on the ground. The recommendations for UNESCO are very clear, highlighting them there in red. And I think infrastructure, as highlighted previously, is also very critical. So is the development of the open science policies that will enable this to flourish. I think also critically, moving away from doing science as usual, business as usual, and moving towards a trajectory where we have science for transformation. And I think this is critical because it will allow us to address very multifaceted issues that affect us in the areas of health, in the areas of energy, in the areas of the environment. It allows science to be positioned at the core. And I mention this because AI will play a role in terms of the development of systems acting on data sets that are emanating from these areas. The International Science Council have recently launched a very, very important call for the development of interdisciplinary science missions hubs in the continent and elsewhere. There's an opportunity here for AI in terms of the programming of these hubs and in terms of leveraging the data sets that are going to be produced by the various activities related to these hubs. If you look at the continent, there is also a very rich and diverse policy landscape in the various areas. Most of these policies are unimplemented, largely unimplemented. There is an opportunity here for use cases, including in around AI, to assist in implementation some of these policies to make sure that the necessary benefits follow. There's also a very critical review of the Science and Technology Innovation Strategy for Africa, STISA, and the development of the new STISA 2034. There's an opportunity here to infuse the open science agenda and indeed address some of the societal challenges through open science and by extension the leverage of AI. And I think this is very critical when the programming for the TISA 2034 is done to draw synergies between it, the other policies and strategies in the continent, including the newly developed AI strategy. The African Open Science Platform plays a role and wants to play a role across all these areas. ASP is driving the agenda for open science in the continent in various pillars, most importantly in making sure that access to infrastructure in the continent by scientists is facilitated. The issue of the overarching policies for supporting open science is something that is also in the purview of the African Open Science Platform. The issue of data management, the research data management cycle. There's gaps in terms of skills in these areas. There's also the need to develop a data science and AI institute, leveraging capacities in the continent and elsewhere to support the African Open Science Platform program. There's also critical need to really identify projects of continental footprint that will allow us to collaborate and work together to address, obviously, African challenges and priorities. We also want to create a network for engagement around open science and a network of skills in these very critical areas. The African Open Science Platform has got a hub and spokes model. We have regional nodes in East Africa currently, the African Institute of Capacity Development. We also have a regional node in North Africa, the Egyptian National Authority for Remote Sensing and Space Sciences. And we also got a node in Southern Africa through the Ubuntu Net Alliance, a network of entrants. ASP really is embedded in the bigger picture regarding regional policy, and I think it's very critical for ASP to identify and leverage policies that we talked about earlier and showcase how we can obviously effect change in the regions through open science. We have done significant work to date in terms of policy influence. Very few countries have got open science policies. Only Ethiopia has got a ratified policy. South Africa is going through the motions of consulting on this policy and also taking it to cabinet and relevant structures. But by and large, most countries are still at the early stages. ASP engages with regional blocs such as SADC to collectively advance areas of open science policy development. We also do a lot of studies. We're also currently looking at a study regarding open science and geoinformatics to look at the potential for geoinformatics in space sciences. You'll agree that space sciences provides a very good opportunity for socio-economic development in the continent. Africa already has got a space science agency and related space science strategies and policies that are being implemented. There's opportunities really through geoinformatics, open science, and space sciences to address AU Agenda 2063 and indeed UN Sustainable Development Goals. And by extension, there's opportunity here for leveraging AI across all those areas that I mentioned. There are very good projects that are currently going on that ASP is part of. If you look at various communities of practice, in this particular case, genomics, there's potential value here in terms of the large data sets that will be generated or are being generated through the domains like genomics. And the hosting of such data sets and their exploitation through AI presents potentially immense value for the continent going forward. The areas of disaster risk reduction are also very critical. The Sunday framework needs to be implemented by countries and by continents. And there are challenges implementing such frameworks, primarily because of some of the gaps that we know very well. For example, there are data issues in terms of both qualitative and quantitative data. The collection of data, its homogenization, and its management, including, for example, economic loss data during disasters. There's also data fragmentation, even internally within governments in countries. And certainly there's issues regarding capacity building across all the spaces of data management. And certainly there's also gaps regarding data policies in terms of crisis. Clearly, there's opportunities for open science and data utility and AI in this area of disaster risk management, as an example. There's also very good potential for computational linguistics in terms of natural language processing. Everybody's talking about ChatGPT and other technologies, but we know that there is very little content in the internet regarding, for example, African languages. There's very important need to really develop these technologies, but also make sure that we develop the necessary content, African content, that is relevant to some of our use cases. So I think the work that is being done by this network of Masakani presents a very good avenue for a use case in the continent regarding AI. Finally, as ASP, we want and we are engaging in dialogue to advance all these areas. South Africa will be hosting the International Data Week, which is the biggest data conference, scientific data conference in the world, coming to Africa in 2027. Every 2 years, this conference rotates around the world. There's an opportunity in dialogue forums like this to domesticate the conversation and to make sure that African views are discussed in detail. We also have annual conferences. We have an Open Science in the South conference coming up in December, and we also have the Science Forum in South Africa coming in December, which will be very critical for continuing some of this dialogue. Thank you very much for having us share these a few thoughts on the African Open Science Platform, opportunities through open science, and certainly avenues for AI going forward through the work that we do. Thank you very much.